I am here on the right side of the screen, which as usual means that we are gathered to talk about the new fusion that has just been announced for Raid. So this is the guy that we're going to be able to fuse in the next upcoming weeks here. This is going to be Skorid, the half-spawn, Skorid, the half-spawn, however you want to say his name. He is a legendary attack-based champion that has a pretty badass aesthetic so far, I must say. So we're going to be going over his kit here real quick. First of all, we have an A1 that attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance, which books to a 60, of applying a debuff spread effect, taking a hex debuff and placing it on all enemies. If the target is not under a hex, it will spread one other random debuff instead, which is quite nice. Having it conditional is okay, but considering that it's also going to spread another debuff makes this guy a little bit more useful for if you're trying to spread like a poison or something like that. Attacks one enemy. Before attacking, places an increased attack on himself for 2 turns, the big version. Repeats the attack on all enemies under a hex debuff. That is very interesting. This attack will ignore shield buffs against targets under a hex debuff. What I'm interested about this, the secondary attack, is that going to be coded as an AoE, or is it going to be coded as a bunch of individual single target attacks? Because if it's a bunch of single target attacks, this guy is going to be absolutely brutal for Hydra, where he's going to be getting around the damage mitigations that you have from AoE attacks, so that's very interesting. A3 attacks all enemies before attacking, places a hex debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. The damage inflicted by this skill increases by 20% for each hex debuff placed. Heals this champion by 20% of their max HP for each hex debuff resisted or blocked. That is interesting. Ultimately, you're going to want this guy to be placing the hexes, and if you have him built out with a proper support team, you're not really going to need that heal, and you're also going to want the accuracy from him because of his debuff spread on the A1 as well. So it's a bit weird. He's also not a HP-based champion or a defense-based champion, so the chances of you having a very high max HP on him is pretty low, I would say. So those heals are not necessarily going to be the most useful because generally you're not relying on an attacker to heal themselves unless you're using like Leech or something like that, right? There is a passive which fills this champion's turn meter by 10% when attacking targets without a hex debuff. Will ignore 15% of a target's defense when they are under a hex debuff. That is a very interesting passive. So if we take that 15% and we compare it, or we pair it with a Savage set, that's going to give us a 40% damage ignore. Sorry, a 40% defense ignore, and then if we compare that with a decreased defense, that's going to add us an additional, 60%, so that's already 100% of ignored defense with just simply Savage, his passive, and a decreased defense, which is pretty insane. So this guy is also bringing an increased attack for himself, so really you just need to pair him with a defense down champion as well as a weakened champion, and you're going to have some insane synergy going on there. That being said, I think this guy is mainly just intended for the Hydra. There's not really anywhere else inside the game right now where we're hardcore depending on something like Hex. That debuff spread could be useful actually for maybe Hard Spider. So Hard Spider is another place where you can get away with a Hex debuff, especially with somebody like an Akemptum. So you could have a Akemptum go in, place those Hexes. You could then have this guy go in with his A1 and try to spread some poisons or something like that. That might be a kind of an interesting strategy. I think this is mainly going to depend, and we're going to have to wait to see how this guy runs in the playtest, because it's mainly going to depend on this A2. If this is coded as an AoE, I don't think this champion is all that special. If this is coded as multiple single target attacks, I think this guy is going to be pretty incredible actually. So again, getting around that Hydra AoE damage mitigation is going to be pretty insane. His A3 is definitely okay as well. Placing the Hex is very useful, so you don't have to worry about bringing in a Hex champion. That being said, though, we have some fantastic Hex champions in the game that you can get more utility out of as well. So somebody like a Mithrala is bringing that increased defense, increased attack, strengthen, and shield, as well as some poisons, right? So I definitely like to run Mithrala on my teams, but if you don't have her yet, or if you're using her in a different team, this guy could be a very, very decent alternative to that. Basically, my verdict on this is going to be if you need a nuker to help you out in Hydra, and pretty much just Hydra or Hard Spider, you might want to consider going for this guy, but if the events are super challenging, or if you don't have the resources and you'd rather just save it, I would say this guy is probably also okay to skip. That is at a first look at the kit, okay? He's probably okay to skip because he is a damage dealer that does a little bit of extra stuff. That being said, stay tuned to some of the larger content creators that get access to the test server. See how he plays on the test server. If he's just a basic damage dealer, then we've seen this guy many times before. if he has some intricacies to his kit that aren't really visible on the overall preview, you might want to go for this guy. I think this guy would definitely be useful. I'm probably going to go for this champion. I don't think I'll end up booking him out, but I like collecting the champions, so I'm going to go for him. I'm going to get him. I'm going to have him in my vault as a Vault Guardian, and it's going to be awesome. Thank you guys all so much for watching and the support on the channel. I'll see you next time.